bases. Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger. Go for deploy.
X2 and everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
You're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew-7 mission as they return to Earth. Dragon Endurance departed the International Space Station at 8:20 a.m. Pacific Time Monday morning. On board Crew-7 are NASA's Jasmine Mogbelli, ESA astronaut Andreas Mogensen, JAXA astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted splashdown site just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX, and joining me today from NASA Communications is Sandra Jones. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Kate. It is great to be here. Upon departing the International Space Station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. The crew also had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry, including getting in their launch and re-entry spacesuits and successfully performing a leak check on those suits. This next phase of the mission is when things will really start to amp up, and Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew-7 home.
First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon capsule, and that's where the heat shield is located. So, in order to expose that heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we're going to jettison that trunk.
And from there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. This burn will last about 14 minutes once it starts. The deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the four located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee, or the highest point of Dragon's current orbit around the Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida. Splashdown is planned for 2:47 a.m. Pacific, 5:47 a.m. Eastern this morning, again off the coast of Pensacola, Florida.
It's all going to go pretty quickly, but before we go any further, let's take a minute to meet our crew.
First up is Lieutenant Colonel Jasmine Mogbelli, who hails from Baldwin, New York, and earned a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. She also graduated with honors from the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. As an AH-1W Super Cobra pilot and Marine Corps test pilot, she has flown more than 150 combat missions. In all, she accrued 2,000 hours of flight time in more than 25 aircraft. At the time of her selection as an astronaut, Mogbelli was testing H-1 helicopters and serving as the Quality Assurance and Avionics Officer for VMX-1. She is also the proud mom of twin girls. With this mission, she will have logged an estimated 199 days in space during her first space flight, including 6 hours and 42 minutes during a spacewalk. And today, she is the commander of Crew-7.
Sitting next to Jasmine is pilot Andreas Mogensen. This is Mogensen's second trip to the space station. His first was as the flight engineer for the ESA IRIS mission in 2015. He was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, and graduated with an international baccalaureate from the Copenhagen International School, a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from Imperial College, London, and a doctorate in aerospace engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. In 2015, Mogensen became the first Danish person to go to space and currently is serving as the European Astronaut Liaison Officer to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. With this mission, he will have logged 209 days in space across 2 flights.
And before we jump into this next one, you might hear some banging behind us. This is a working facility, as you may know, open 24 hours a day working to build rockets. So if you do hear that, that is some of what you might be hearing in the background. So next up in the role of mission specialist is Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Satoshi Furukawa. Furukawa's interest in space began when he was 5 years old and saw the Apollo 11 moon landing on TV. He was also a fan of the Japanese TV space hero Ultra 7. His professional career began as a medical doctor, but after seeing a news report about Japan auditioning for new astronauts to do science experiments on the space station, he decided to apply. He was selected by the National Space Development Agency of Japan to be an astronaut candidate in 1999. His first mission to the International Space Station was as a flight engineer for Expedition 28 and 29 that launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in June 2011. Following this mission, he will have logged 366 days in space across his 2 trips to space.
And to round it all out, mission specialist Konstantin Borisov was selected to be a cosmonaut in 2018, and this was his first trip to space. He has a Bachelor of Economics from the Russian Academy of Economics, a Master of Science in Operations Research and Systems Analysis from Warwick University in Coventry, UK, and a Master in Aircraft Life Support Systems from the Moscow Aviation Institute. He's worked for companies such as Volvo and the Boston Consulting Group. He is also an experienced freediving instructor and an international freediving judge. He will end this mission logging 199 days in space. Now, to prepare for upcoming events, the Dragon spacecraft is currently doing a couple of things autonomously, meaning automatically. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep Dragon, the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable for Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin during reentry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate all the data, the power, and the fluid connections between the capsule and the trunk. As I mentioned earlier, at the base of the vehicle is where that heat shield is located, and that's where the trunk is currently connected. So we're going to jettison that trunk in order to prepare the vehicle for re-entry, as that heat shield is a critical component of that re-entry, given the fact that it's going to be re-entering through the atmosphere. The atmosphere is going to be doing a ton of that work, creating lots of heat and friction and helping to slow the vehicle down using that heat shield. So we want to get the trunk out of the way and separate it from the capsule. We'll be sure to bring you live views of the vehicle whenever we have them. Unfortunately, due to ground station coverage, we don't always have those beautiful views of the capsule or of the crew inside the capsule, but as soon as we have them, we will be sure to bring them to you. On your screen now is a live view of SpaceX Mission Control here, actually just over to the side of us, and that is where Dragon operators are stationed on console, monitoring and observing the crew and the vehicle to ensure that everything is going as planned. As I said, Dragon is doing several things autonomously, and these operators are monitoring those systems and those checkouts. So let's talk a little bit about the flight history of Dragon. So the development of Dragon for Crew started with the Dragon cargo spacecraft. Dragon was designed from the beginning for flying humans to space, so much so that even the first Dragon, like the one just behind us, had a window. Before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 were suitable for flying people, and then put both vehicles through thousands of tests to prove their safety. Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond. It is the only spacecraft currently flying that is capable of returning significant amounts of cargo to Earth, and is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station. Dragon is fully autonomous, which means that it can basically fly itself. But it also features full manual override capabilities just in case of an emergency. So taking a closer look at it, there you can see an animation. It stands at almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk to the top of the nose cone, and it's composed of 2 main elements: the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, which is the top half, and then the trunk, which is the unpressurized section there at the bottom half. The nose cone at the very top of the capsule protects the docking system and also the guidance navigation control system. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to Dragon, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts. So right now, that nose cone is actually open, as we have not yet closed it in preparation for the for capsule reentry. Dragon has a final burn to perform, which will be the reentry burn, where it will utilize, as Sandra mentioned earlier, the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters located at the top, and we can't use those if the nose cone is closed. So it's still open, and we'll close that after that burn is complete. Now, opposite of the nose cone is the trunk. It provides attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and cargo. One half of the trunk is covered in solar arrays, and that helps to generate power while Dragon is on station. The other half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new Pika tiling technology. The trunk also now has new aerodynamic fins, which help provide stability in the event of an emergency abort. Now, in the event of an abort, Dragon is outfitted with 8 Super Draco thrusters. And like the name implies, they are very similar to the nominal Draco thrusters that Dragon uses for nominal operations, but the Super Dracos are extra powerful, and they will power the astronauts to safety. Dragon's Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Dragon, which gives the crew the ability to quickly separate from Falcon 9 and safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit. This is a feature that no other spacecraft in history has possessed. Dragon is also equipped with 16 Draco thrusters, as I mentioned earlier, used to orient the spacecraft during the mission, including apogee and perigee maneuvers, orbit adjustment, and attitude control. Each Draco thruster is capable of generating 90 pounds of force in the vacuum of space. Inside, the spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board. It is capable of flying up to 7 individuals, but we only have 4 on board today. The control panel is centered between the pilot and the commander seats and consists of 3 touchscreen displays, allowing the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually. Once we get that onboard view of the Dragon capsule, we'll be able to see that control panel that, like I said, rests between the pilot and the commander seats. It's one of my favorite views that we get from crew missions because it makes you feel like you're inside the capsule with them. You can even see some of the telemetry and the visualizations on the screens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the trunk as you were talking about Dragon. We are just about 7 minutes away from that trunk separation. Again, we do discard that trunk because it's no longer needed. It provides that power with the solar arrays to Dragon, but because they are about to deorbit and come home, that's no longer needed. So that will be separated here in just a few minutes from now, and then it will harmlessly re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. So while we await that, let's talk a little bit about some of the science that Crew-7 participated in. Over the last 23 years, crews aboard the International
Dragon SpaceX deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes. For awareness, this will occur during a TDRS handover. The next SpaceX call will confirm nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon Cathy started deorbit sequence in 5 minutes, and we'll catch you after 10 seconds.
And we did just hear those words from the Corps here in Hawthorne, California, up to Jasmine Mogbelli, the commander of Crew-7, letting her know and the Crew-7 crew know that everything is looking good. They're proceeding towards deorbit and reentry here, targeting that reentry at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time this morning off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. And they did mention TDRS. That's that tracking and data relay system. And as Kate was mentioning, we don't always have views of the crew on board Dragon or the International Space Station, just based off of some of the handover between satellites that occurs. So this is expected, but we'll talk to the crew once the trunk is successfully jettisoned. So continuing on to talk a little bit about some of the science on board Crew-7 that they helped to conduct. Over the last 23 years, crews aboard the International Space Station have completed thousands of scientific and educational experiments, and Crew-7 added to that growing number during their 6-month mission to the space station. One of those particular studies is called CIPHER, or the Complement of Integrated Protocols for Human Exploration Research. For longer journeys to the moon and Mars, scientists are examining how extended time in space affects the human body. Astronauts on missions of various lengths can participate in an integrated set of studies that monitors their health before, during, and after missions. Results could play a pivotal role in ensuring the safety, health, and success of astronauts on deep space exploration missions. CIPHER began with Crew-7 and is continuing with Crew-8, which launched and arrived to the space station just last week. They also contributed to Sleep in Orbit, an investigation from ESA, or the European Space Agency. This study examines the physiological differences between sleep on Earth and in space. The stages of sleep are related to brain states and can be accessed based on the brain's electrical signals. Sleep in Orbit uses an earbud EEG device that measures the brain activity of astronauts during sleep. The device was developed in Denmark to easily wear without the helmet-like network of wires used for standard EEGs, making it less likely to interfere with sleep. Results could help guide development of measures to prevent or even mitigate poor sleep and its adverse effects, enhancing safety and improving work quality during missions. Additionally, controlling microbial growth in recycled wastewater is necessary to provide water that is safe for drinking and for personal hygiene, and to protect the integrity of life support systems for human habitation in space. Bacterial adhesion and corrosion studied how spaceflight affects the formation of biofilms, which are communities of multiple species of bacteria that adhere to surfaces. This investigation looked at the ability of biofilms to corrode stainless steel surfaces, similar to those in space station's drinking water system, and examined how well disinfectants cleared out those biofilms. Results could provide insight into better ways to control and remove resistant biofilms and could contribute to the success of future long-duration missions. So these are just a few of the more than 200 science experiments and technology demonstrations that took place during Crew-7's mission.
Now let's talk a little bit about the suits that the Crew-7 crew is wearing. They are iconic, they're gorgeous, and most importantly, they are safe. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. If that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitable environment long enough for the crew to return home. The flame-resistant materials on the outer layer also protect the crew in the event of a fire. Custom-tailored, single-piece suit. This means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached. The helmet is made from a 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open. The quick disconnect, or QD, on the right thigh mates to an umbilical on the seat. This provides air for ventilation, as well as a oxygen, nitrogen, or nitrox mixture for pressurization, and allows for the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. A tubing network inside the suit delivers air to the neck and limbs to keep the crew cool while wearing the suit. The suit's communication system consists of helmet-mounted microphones and in-ear speakers. All in all, it takes less than 15 minutes to put on the suit. Of course, that is also with some practice as well. The suit, like I said, is intended to be used inside of Dragon. It's an intravehicular activity, or IVA suit. When the astronauts move onto the International Space Station, the suits actually stay on board Dragon. They hang them up to dry, and then once they're dry, they get packed away. The astronauts will then use NASA's extravehicular activity, or EVA suit, when performing activities outside of the International Space Station, such as, of course, spacewalks. So a little bit of a difference there between the two suits. Very important difference, because they are certainly made for two different intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to jump in on the EVA spacesuits that you were talking about for those external spacewalks, we did have one spacewalk that occurred during Crew-7's mission for NASA, and Jasmine Mogbelli, the commander of Crew-7, conducted that spacewalk. It was her very first spacewalk, and it lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes.
Wow, that is a long time for a first one, just to me, having never done one.
Right. Yeah. They usually are about, 6-7 hours or so. The limit on the time for a spacewalk is what we call consumables. So we often say that a spacesuit is like a mini spaceship. It has all the oxygen that the crew needs to breathe. It purges nitrogen. Everything that they need to live and work in the environment of the vacuum of space is contained inside that spacesuit. So they can't do that forever. Obviously, there's a limit to how long those consumables last, but typically they are around that 6-7 hour time frame.
Very cool. So we just got word that claw separation is currently underway. That is on time. We did hear a call out indicating that it was going to begin at the 48-minute mark, and so it looks like that is tracking on time. The claw is where the umbilicals for the power and the telemetry from the trunk and its solar arrays are connected to the capsule. Once we are disconnected completely, the Dragon will be running exclusively on its battery power. After that claw is completely separated, we will jettison the trunk, and that is once again when we basically separate the trunk from the vehicle, and that allows us to expose the heat shield, which will be critical for reentry operations as the vehicle is coming back through the Earth's atmosphere.
That's right, and it looks like we're now just about 20 seconds or so away from trunk separation, so everything continuing to go really smoothly this morning, and then right after that happens will be the deorbit slew when the vehicle helps to orient itself to the proper position ahead of the deorbit burn, and we'll talk more about that as we get a little closer to deorbit burn now, about less than 5 minutes away from starting, so things
That's
really
great.
Moving quickly this morning.
Yeah, that deorbit burn is important because that is when the crew commits to that exact location. If you've watched our webcasts for Splashdown or crew return missions previously, you know that we're always tracking alternative. We just got word that trunk separation is complete.
Dragon SpaceX, nominal trunk jettison.
All right, good news there. Thought we might hear something back from the crew, but as mentioned before, there is a TDRS handover, meaning we're switching from one satellite to another of the tracking and data relay satellite system. So we might not hear anything back from the crew right now, but we got good news from SpaceX core Arthur Barialt that the trunk has separated, so the heat shield is exposed, and that trunk will naturally disintegrate as it also re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
And the trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through its solar cells and converting that to battery power. So since we separated the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we don't need to since we're coming home and Dragon has enough battery power already stored on board.
Yeah. Like we said, once we have views of the crew inside the capsule, we hope to bring them to you due to ground station coverage. We don't have live views through the entire show, unfortunately, and we would love to see them just as much as you, so we hope to have those soon. But I can tell you that the crew is suited up and in their seats. They performed a leak check on those suits before we started the broadcast, and everything looked good with those, and so they're basically in their seats, buckled in with the safety harness, and everything. Actually, look at that. Ask and you shall receive. There we have our first views of the morning inside Dragon Endurance with our Crew-7 crew.
And as you mentioned, Kate, they are suited up for this phase of flight. They do wear those spacesuits during some of the more dynamic phases of flight, for example, during launch and as they reach orbit, as well as docking, undocking, and deorbit and splashdown. And so we are seeing a view here in the center of your screen. That's Commander Jasmine Moghbeli of NASA. This is her first space flight. And we are just about 2 minutes and 20 seconds away from that deorbit burn beginning.
Yeah, we did see that the crew did have their visors in the open position. That is allowed for now. We will hear from SpaceX Core instruction to the crew to close their visors and put them in the lock position. I can't quite remember off the top of my head if that comes prior to deorbit burn or prior to the reentry phase, but we'll find out soon enough.
And that deorbit burn, again, will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone, which is targeted for off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, rather. And the deorbit burn is quite a long burn. It lasts about 14 minutes once it begins. So at this point, we're now about 1 minute and 30 seconds away from that deorbit burn beginning. Again, we're getting another view inside of Dragon here. On your left is Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov. And then to his right is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen, NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Satoshi Furukawa on the far right. So now we're getting another view of Konstantin Borisov here. And like we've said a couple times, they are suited up for this phase of the flight and will remain in their spacesuits all the way through the deorbit burn, through splashdown, and as they get onto the recovery vessel, as well as they are egressed or exit Dragon.
Now, when the crew egresses from the capsule, we will utilize the side hatch, which is actually in view right here. It was that the rectangle that had the black outline just at the feet of the crew. That is the side hatch. That has been closed since when they ingressed to the capsule on launch day. So basically, when they're up at the International Space Station, they utilize the forward hatch, which is the hatch at the top of the capsule, because that's where the International Docking Adapter is located, and that's what docks to the space station and allows them to ingress and egress onto the station and into the capsule during their stay. So, and we just got a call out saying that deorbit burn has begun. This burn is expected to last for about 14 minutes.
Yep, and just a quick recap here. Within the last 10 minutes, Dragon has jettisoned its trunk and initiated that deorbit burn just seconds ago, 20 seconds ago, and it is a little less than 14 minutes in all. So for these operations, NASA and SpaceX do closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of all those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices regarding splashdown are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. So we do really want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases the risk to the astronauts in the capsule, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. So for the safety of the crew and your safety, we do recommend you sit back and watch, and we'll continue to bring you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
Like I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site. Like we mentioned earlier, we're targeting just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida today. Right now, Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, the Draco thruster firings, and trajectory details like entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until the deorbit burn completes. Dragon is flying itself, so all the crew really has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things, which sounds easy, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. If I were in there, I would be wanting to take off my strap and look out the window because what a view it would be. Now, with Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin about ready to deorbit and splash back down on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather.
And again, NASA and SpaceX jointly selected primary splashdown location for Crew-7 off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. This selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. And so all of those boxes were checked. Pensacola was considered prime, and we are hearing that the weather there is just perfect. The wave height is very minimal, so looking forward to see the crew splashdown here in less than an hour.
Absolutely. Now, in general, for return, we start calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for reentry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, which prevents us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them, thankfully. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up with Dragon, would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in, so that we need to avoid it. And weather is something, again, we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. Everything looking good, though. We are still continuing to target Pensacola. For the Crew-7 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying free today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternative, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we're in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And again, that deorbit burn is currently underway. We're 5 minutes and 35 seconds into it, with just about 8 minutes remaining.
Now, we are waiting to hear the call out for nominal burn to confirm completion of the deorbit burn for Dragon Endurance. As we mentioned earlier, when we have views of the capsule, we will bring them to you, but due to ground station coverage, unfortunately, we don't have them for the entire show. But the crew is in their seats, they have their suits on, and they are continuing to monitor Dragon as on its way back to planet Earth. It's like we mentioned before, it's heading to Pensacola, Florida, located in the Gulf of Mexico. On your screen now is a live view of Mission Control Hawthorne, where Dragon operators are standing by, monitoring Dragon's progress and reviewing activity and informing the crew of any changes necessary.
And so while we await that deorbit burn to wrap up, we will talk a little bit more about an upcoming cargo flight to the International Space Station. Later this month, SpaceX's 30th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station for NASA is slated to lift off from the agency's Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX's Dragon will deliver new science investigations, food, supplies, and equipment to the international crew. NASA and partner research flying aboard the SpaceX 30 mission includes a look at plant metabolism in space and a set of new sensors for free-flying Astrobee robots to provide 3D mapping capabilities. Other studies include a fluid physics study that could benefit solar cell technology and a university project from CSA, or the Canadian Space Agency, that will monitor sea ice and ocean conditions. Commercial resupply by U.S. companies significantly increases NASA's capability to conduct more investigations aboard the orbiting laboratory. And these investigations lead to new technologies, medical treatments, and products that improve life on Earth. Other U.S. government agencies, private industry, and academic and research institutions can also conduct microgravity research through the agency's partnership with the International Space Station National Laboratory.
All right, let's talk a bit more with the about ongoing astronaut graduation. NASA welcomed its newest class of the next generation Artemis astronauts in a ceremony at the agency's Johnson Space Center in Houston just last week on March 5th. Selected for training in 2021, the astronaut graduates were chosen from a pool of more than 12,000 applicants. Wow, just incredible. And successfully completed more than 2 years of required basic training, including spacewalking, robotics, space station systems, and more. The graduating NASA astronauts, I will let you handle all the names, as I'm sure you've practiced them many times.
So the graduating NASA astronauts are Nicole Ayers of Colorado Springs, Colorado, Marcus Barrios of Guanabala, Puerto Rico, Chris Birch of Gilbert, Arizona, Denise Bunham of Wasilla, Alaska, Luke Delaney of DeBary, Florida, Andre Douglas of Chesapeake, Florida, Jack Hathaway of South Windsor, Connecticut, Anil Menon of Minneapolis, Chris Williams of Potomac, Maryland, and Jessica Whitner of Clovis, California. So continuing the long tradition of international partnership, two UAE or United Arab Emirates astronauts, Nora Al-Matrusi and Mohammed Al-Mula of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, trained alongside their NASA counterparts for the past 2 years, as well as participated in the graduation ceremony. The graduates are now eligible for flight and may be assigned to missions designated for the International Space Station, future commercial space stations, and Artemis missions to the Moon in preparation for Mars. And NASA has also recently announced the opening for the next round of astronaut applications. So if you are interested, you can apply if you meet the qualifications. To be considered for an astronaut position, applicants must be a U.S. citizen, have a master's degree in a STEM or science, technology, engineering, or math field, and have a minimum of 3 years of related professional experience and be able to have that successful experience to complete the long-duration flight astronaut physical. The master's degree requirement can also be met by 2 years of work toward a doctoral program, a completed medical degree, or even completion of a nationally recognized test pilot school program. Astronaut candidates must also have skills in leadership, teamwork, and communications. Artemis generation astronauts will explore and conduct experiments where humans have never been, the lunar South Pole. With NASA's plans for the future of exploration, new astronauts will fly further into space than ever before on lunar missions and may be the first humans to fly onto Mars. Astronaut applications are currently open now through April 2nd, so for more information, visit nasa.gov/astronauts if you're interested in applying.
I always love looking at the resumes of astronaut selection because it's just such a diverse group of people that have such incredible experiences from all parts of the world and beyond. There are people that you just look at each cadre, and it's just an incredible group of people. Special shout out to Anil, former SpaceXer, and we're so happy to see him among the group.
Yeah, absolutely. It is always exciting to welcome in a new class and, of course, do the recruitment. I'm really looking forward to seeing who is selected for this next round. So, again, if you're just joining us, we are awaiting the return of Crew-7 after their 6-month mission to the International Space Station, where they conducted science, research, and investigations, as well as participated in technology demonstrations. We are currently awaiting the deorbit burn to end. That is a longer burn, but it now has about a minute and 30 seconds remaining in that deorbit burn, and that's really going to help us get in the prime position to start to dip into the Earth's atmosphere ahead of splashdown.
Yeah, that deorbit burn, as we mentioned earlier, is what really commits the crew into their final landing site. As we mentioned before, we always have a primary and a backup location, and so if for some reason the weather would have turned unfavorable or the landing area wasn't clear, we would have been able to pivot to a different landing zone. But this deorbit burn is what really commits the crew into that final selection. So we are targeting the primary splashdown site just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, in the Gulf Coast, off the Gulf Coast of Florida. and we're looking forward to having them back. The crew is in their suits. They are in their seats, and, as you mentioned, they've been up there for about 6 months, and I'm sure they're really excited to come home.
Yeah, absolutely. So standing by for confirmation that deorbit burn has ended. We expect that in about 30 seconds or so. We were talking a bit about the TDRS, or Tracking Data Relay System, handover, basically just a brief time period where we may not have communications with the crew due to those satellite handovers, but we do expect to hear confirmation that that burn was nominal.
Dragon SpaceX, deorbit burn complete, performance nominal, nose cone closure initiated.
And right on time. Great to
Dragon copy.
great to hear that deorbit burn was successful.
Up next, we're going to close the nose cone, which, as I mentioned earlier, is still open as we were using those 4 forward bulkhead Draco thrusters in order to perform that deorbit burn. So now that that deorbit burn is complete, and as we heard, it performed nominal, which basically means normal, which is good news.
And in the background, Dragon is going to work to currently inhibit those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for reentry. And that nose cone will remain shut all the way through splashdown after this point. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This helps to keep Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine cool and comfortable during reentry. That reentry is coming up in about 20 minutes or so. At this point, again, the nose cone is closing to help protect the forward hatch for reentry. And the crew on board, Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine, will use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. So just a couple minutes out from that nose cone fully closing.
It looks like we have about a minute and a half for that nose cone to close. As you mentioned, earlier, it's not just a simple shut. There are a couple sets of hooks that have to lock in. So we're expecting that to wrap up in about a minute and a half. Shortly thereafter, we'll hear a call out. We'll probably hear a debriefing from SpaceX Core to the crew to give them the latest update on final splashdown time, as well as the anticipated loss of signal, or LOS. This happens every crew return mission, where the plasma on the outside of the capsule builds up so much so that communications and commanding of the vehicle are not allowed. And so it basically means that we won't be able to call the crew, and the crew won't be able to call down to us. That typically lasts between 5 to 7 minutes or so. So we should get a pre-reentry brief from the Corps, and hopefully we'll get the final update on expected weather. We did hear earlier that the anticipated wind speed was 4.2 knots, and that the wave height was less than 1 foot. So all in all, it should be, fingers crossed, a pretty stable recovery in terms of the crew won't be bobbing up and down too much with high waves.
Yeah, I couldn't ask for any better weather. So again, we're standing by for that nose cone to successfully close. That has remained open since the crew launched all the way back in August. The nose cone is opened shortly after launch, and the reason it needs to open is because that nose cone actually exposes all of the docking mechanisms, the umbilicals, and how the Dragon attaches to the International Space Station, and then it ultimately becomes the hatch that the crew utilizes to float on board the International Space Station. So that has been open for the past 6 months, and right now we're working on that nose cone to be closed. We do expect that call out just moments from now that the nose cone was successfully closed.
So we're going to stand by. Actually, we are now hearing that the nose cone has closed. So we will hopefully hear something from the Corps to confirm that, but we are seeing here that the nose cone has closed. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox or nitrogen-oxygen mixture into the suits that are worn by Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine. They receive this air. It's also important because they will be told to close the visors on their helmets, which means that they need air. So we're going to flow some of that nitrox air, which is the same air that you breathe when you go scuba diving. So it's cooled, it helps keep them comfortable, and also provides breathing air during the re-entry phase. Now, the heat shield, we talked about that before, and it's a critical component of the capsule because the external temperatures will reach about 3,500 degrees. Which means that the heat shield will protect the capsule as well as the rest of the thermal protection system during that re-entry phase. But that heat shield will basically be pointing forward. It will be receiving the atmosphere, and this is a good thing. The atmosphere will actually be helping us out quite a bit this evening, or this morning, I guess it is, as the capsule in its orbital velocity, which is going right now, is going 17,500 miles per hour, and that the atmosphere will actually help to reduce that speed down to about 350 miles per hour, which is when the drogue parachutes will deploy. So the atmosphere actually does us a huge favor by providing that friction that helps to slow the capsule down. It does generate a great amount of heat, though, and that's what that heat shield and the thermal protection system, which are the white panels all around the exterior of the Dragon capsule, although they're not so white after they re-enter. Looks a little bit like a toasted marshmallow. But we will get to see that live here. We are coming up to landing in just about 20 minutes or so. So we'll be able to see that for ourselves. It's one of my favorite things when we get to see the capsule being lifted out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. Now, if you've just recently joined us, we are targeting a splashdown off the Gulf Coast of Florida near Pensacola. Recovery vessel Megan is en route, or excuse me, is already there in position, waiting for Dragon Endurance to splash down, and we are expecting that splashdown to occur in about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, we're targeting splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time. So the next major milestone that we are looking ahead towards this morning is EI, or entry interface, and that is when the crew begins to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and do that slowing down portion, which is critical to help bring their speed down ahead of splashdown. And during that time period, we will experience what is known as a blackout period, where we will not have communications or visuals with the crew due to that plasma building up around the heat shield. This is expected, and we will regain communications with the crew when they're on the other side of that blackout. So to talk a little bit more about the heat shield, SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pika-X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply service missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2, crew, and cargo. It has enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimize the heat shield and help drive down the cost and mass as well.
The remainder of the Dragon capsule is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika.
SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon copies, nose cone secured.
All right, just back and forth there with SpaceX core Arthur Berrialt. As I was saying before, the SpaceX proprietary ablative material is another class of thermal protection and is lighter weight versus Pika, and it helps protect the underlying composite structure during reentry in order to ensure that the structural capabilities are maintained, which is super important because we reuse these capsules.
And while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS thermal protection system, coupled with the ECLIS environmental control and life support system, is the pressurized interior that will ensure that Jasmine Mogbelli, Andy Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through splashdown.
After Dragon Endurance has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August of last year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule detect that they're at the right speed and altitude.
The vehicle's velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and those drogue parachutes do deploy at about 18,000 feet. Vehicle velocity when the main deploy is initiated is approximately 119 miles per hour, and those deploy at about 6,500 feet. And then vehicle velocity when they do splashdown is about 16 miles per hour.
And that, of course, is at 0 feet. So those drogue parachutes, we mentioned before that the atmosphere does quite a bit of work in order to slow the vehicle down as it is re-entering the atmosphere. The drogue parachutes also do a tremendous amount of work. I want to give a special shout out to our Bloomfield, Connecticut site that manufactures our drogue parachutes, SpaceX parachutes. And I've seen the drogues in person, and it is incredible how small they are. Let me rephrase that. They look small on camera, but they're actually much bigger than I thought they were, and it's just incredible how mighty they are, even though they're not nearly as big as the main parachutes are. Like Sandra mentioned, they basically bring the capsule down from 350 miles per hour to about 119 miles per hour. So those drogue parachutes are important not just for stabilizing the capsule, but also helping to decelerate it even further. Now, after Dragon Endurance has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, we were just talking about those parachutes. Those drogue parachutes, those will be followed by the 4 main parachutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August of last year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule detect that they are at the right speed and altitude. So we have a lot coming up in basically the next 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, we're targeting splashdown about 25 minutes from now. That entry interface beginning in 10 minutes, about 11, I would say, actually, and then blackout about 12 minutes and 50 seconds from now. So it's going to start to really ramp up. But again, everything is moving along smoothly. We did have the trunk that separated successfully. The nose cone has been closed. We had the deorbit burn that was successful as well. So now we're just waiting for Dragon to dip down a little further into the atmosphere, that orbit to be lowered so that they can begin that entry interface portion of today's flight.
Exactly, and that is expected. The crew knows, the point of time in which that will occur, and typically we start to hear the crew hail back at us. Typically a little bit earlier than the predicted loss of signal period is. So all of this coming up in the very near term. As we mentioned earlier, things go kind of quickly. It seems like they were just undocking moments ago, and here they are already on their way back to planet Earth. Once again, we are anticipating a splashdown time of 2:48 a.m. Pacific time here, or 5:48 a.m. Eastern time. The wind speed is about 4 knots, so pretty mild, and the wave height is less than 1 foot. So all in all, really good. As for night recovery versus day recovery, this capsule in particular, Dragon Endurance, has only done night recoveries. So we've actually done nighttime splashdowns for Crew-1, Crew-2, Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-6, and soon Crew-7. And Dragon Endurance supported Crew-3, Crew-5, and of course Crew-7.
For entry briefing.
Dragon, just be for entry briefing.
All right. Want to remind you we have an expected LOS at 0934 Zulu, expected AOS at 0941 Zulu. All other times are going to be accurate per the tablet timeline. No other updates at this time for entry. Weather remains nominal, and recovery forces remain ready to support.
Dragon Captains, expected ILS for 0934 to 0941. I'm happy on the weather and recovery sources.
Good read back to us.
And so those communications from the ground here in Hawthorne, California, up to Crew-7 Commander, NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli, letting her know about some of the expected events that are ahead. So first up will be the entry interface in about 8 minutes from now, and then that blackout period about 9 minutes and 45 seconds from now. We will have a loss of signal period during that time period, and then we will have splashdown. We are targeting that splashdown again for 2:47 a.m. Pacific time, and that is 22 minutes and 30 seconds from now. Everything continuing to move along smoothly. The weather off the coast of Pensacola, Florida is ideal and perfect for splashdown. The crew is feeling good. They're suited up. They've completed that deorbit burn. The trunk has already been separated. The nose cone has been closed. So we're continuing to check through those milestones, and again, looking forward to that entry interface in 7 minutes from now. And it looks like we are getting some views inside the capsule right now. That is NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli, who is the commander. She's the prime one you see in your screen there, and this over-the-shoulder view as well, showing European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen. As Kate mentioned, we can see on their screens they're monitoring everything, just keeping track of where things are at as they approach splashdown in 21 minutes and 30 seconds from now. But on their end, they don't have to do much. They are able to just sit back and enjoy the ride as Dragon is an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, that view right there, we can actually see right in the center it was showing us the splashdown zone. Once again, we are targeting off the coast of Florida near Pensacola. And that display, I believe they're able to track Dragon live as well. So that was a static view of where they are targeting, but I believe they can also track Dragon as well, which would be really fun if you're sitting there and you happen to be, re-entering over your hometown, wave below to friends and family. I think that'd be a pretty cool experience.
And speaking of that, Dragon will actually be re-entering right over my hometown in the middle of nowhere, a tiny town in Nebraska. But if you are in the Midwestern portion of the United States, if you go outside right now, you will have just a few minutes from now, you might be able to see Dragon as it flies overhead, beginning to fly across southwest Nebraska through Kansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and of course, splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. So if you are anywhere along that trajectory, you can look outside and see Dragon fly over ahead. Again, that entry interface, when we expect Dragon to maybe first begin to be visible, will be at about 5:36 a.m. Eastern. So head outside now, and you can maybe listen to the broadcast on your phone, and we'll keep you updated. And hopefully we'll see some photos from you all of seeing Crew-7 re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
I personally haven't seen a Dragon re-entry yet, but I have been told by friends and colleagues that have seen one that it's pretty spectacular, and that it's remarkably bright, which makes sense. It is going from 17,000 miles per hour down to about 350. So yeah, there will be a bright streak across the sky, and it will look, if you've seen a rocket launch, it will look different than that. So, like you said, if you're in that area, head on out, and yeah, you might be able to see it. It's a different meaning for flyover state.
Yes, absolutely, and especially with evening splashdown, the views should be pretty spectacular here. So it looks like we are now about 4 minutes away from entry interface and about 6 minutes away from that blackout period beginning.
Yeah, you make a great point about views during nighttime splashdown / recovery operations. It's easy to assume that a nighttime operation is not as visible, but we have multiple vessels out there, primarily the recovery vessel Megan, with bright floodlights that we can see there. The crew is now putting their visors down in preparation for entry interface, and and ultimately splashdown. This is also one of the final moments that we can see zero-G.
Dragon tablets are secured, restraints are tightened, and visors are down, all 4 crew.
SpaceX copies all for crew entry preparation. We are 5 minutes to expected blackout. We'll see you on the other side at 0941.
Okay, copy, SpaceX. We'll see you on the other side.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say that was SpaceX Core Arthur Berrialt letting the crew know that they're about 5 minutes out from that entry interface, and that we expect to get their signal back, also known as acquisition of signal or AOS, at 0941 UTC, which will be 241 Pacific. So we should expect to hear Jasmine's voice once again. In about in 11 minutes from now. Math is really hard at this time of night, morning, whatever it is.
Yep, absolutely. And we were just getting a view there of some of the stickers on board Dragon. Those indicate the other missions and the other crew that have flown aboard Dragon. So it's interesting to see more and more stickers fill up these Dragons as we fly more frequently. Again, we're about 2 minutes away from the entry interface beginning, 4 minutes away from the blackout. We will not have views of the crew or communications with them during that blackout period. But as the Corps mentioned to the crew just moments ago, we'll see them on the other side once they've re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and ahead of those drogue deploys and then the main. So again, if you are in any of those states that we mentioned, Nebraska, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, head outside right now and you might be able to see Dragon streaking through the sky in just about 5 minutes from now. Pretty spectacular if you're up. It's something you don't want to miss.
Now, you mentioned the stickers. Those were placed there by previous missions flown on this Dragon, which was Crew-3 and Crew-5. So that's a fun astronaut tradition that we have when they get to fly in Dragon. Another tradition is naming of the capsule. So since the beginning of the U.S. space program, astronauts have had the opportunity to name their spacecraft, starting with Alan Shepard naming his spacecraft Freedom-7 during the Mercury program. In keeping with this tradition, each of the NASA Dragon spacecraft astronaut crews have had the opportunity to select a name for their Dragon if it was the first mission for that Dragon. So Endurance was first flown on NASA's Crew-3 mission, which is the capsule today. NASA astronaut Rajachari announced the name Endurance ahead of the Crew-3 mission, which he served as commander. It has since flown on the Crew-5 mission and, of course, now the Crew-7 mission, totaling 3 flights for this spacecraft. A nice little timeline there for the different capsules that we have. We also have Dragon Endeavour, which was the first crew capsule that we launched with crew. Of course, that was with NASA astronauts Bob and Doug, our beloved space dads, flying in the Demonstration Mission 2 mission. That was in, I believe it was in March or May of 2020. It seems like it was just yesterday in many ways. And then we also have Dragon Resilience, which supported multiple missions, and Dragon Endurance that we have today, as well as Dragon Freedom. So all in all, 4 current capsules that are active in the fleet. And like you said, every time a crew flies in one, they get to put a mission patch on the inside of the capsule. And they also get to sign the white room of the launch tower right before they ingress into the capsule for their launch day. So we like our traditions.
Yes, lots of traditions all around. We are about 30 seconds away from the crew beginning to first dip into the Earth's atmosphere, and we'll really be looking to the heat shield to do a lot of that work. And again, because of that plasma buildup that's going to occur, we are going to have a communications blackout with the crew during this time period, expecting that blackout to begin about a minute from now.
Yeah, that anticipated loss of signal, or that blackout period, will be about 6 minutes long, 6.5 minutes, and about a minute away, as you just said. So this happens every crew mission as the capsule is re-entering through the Earth's atmosphere, as that plasma builds up around the side of the capsule during that re-entry period, as It's coming back through the atmosphere. Right in space, there is no atmosphere, but when it's re-entering, it's starting to come back through the atmosphere, which ultimately builds up friction, and that translates into energy, such as plasma forming on the exterior of the capsule. But the crew stays quite comfortable inside the capsule. They have cooled nitrox, or nitrogen-oxygen mixture, flowing through their suits, and that helps keep them cool, as well as the thermal systems within Dragon. It also helps to make sure that they stay pretty comfortable, even though the external temperatures can reach 3,500 degrees. So at this point in time, like we said, we are entering that communications blackout period right now, actually. And this lasts about 6.5 minutes due to the plasma formation around the spacecraft, as I said. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from an orbital velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature that Dragon will experience upon re-entry is about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and we do expect this blackout period to last for another 6 minutes or so. We are expecting to hear back from Jasmine at 0941 UTC or 2:41 a.m. Pacific time, and sometimes we actually acquire that signal earlier than anticipated, so we might actually hear from her a bit sooner than that.
And this is my one last plug, because it does not always re-enter over the United States. If you are in those states we've mentioned several times,
go now.
This is literally, you have like 30 seconds, so sprint outside and go and see it. We are very much so looking forward to seeing the crew splash down and seeing them re-enter from our side, but it's not going to be the same view, certainly, as what you all will have. So I hope some of you are out there looking up and enjoying the view for us.
Absolutely. Now, we do hope to bring you views from a thermal tracking cam that we hope to have once the capsule is visible. I believe the WB-57 might be on the prowl tonight, and hopefully we will also be able to bring views. We have cameras located on our recovery vessel Megan, which is in place awaiting splashdown. It's about a mile or so away from the splashdown site, and so we'll also have cameras there. So as soon as we have something to bring you, we certainly will. Once again, the capsule is going from orbital velocity about 17,000 miles per hour down to a speed of about 350 miles per hour. At that point in time, the drogue parachutes will deploy. Those are the smaller parachutes that help to stabilize the capsule and help decelerate it even further, down to about 119 miles per hour. At that point in time, and that's roughly at about 6,500 feet above the ocean surface, the main parachutes will deploy. And once again, we will hopefully bring you views once we have those. And then, of course, once those main parachutes deploy, it's just a few seconds. Excuse me. It's actually more than a few seconds, because it's several thousand feet off the ocean floor. Ocean surface, excuse me. But ultimately, those main parachutes will help to decelerate the capsule down to about 16 miles per hour when it ultimately splashes down. And we are expecting that splashdown time to occur at 5:47 a.m. Eastern Time, 2:47 a.m. Pacific Time.
Yep, now less than 10 minutes, and then once splashdown occurs, we'll continue to walk you through all of the recovery operations and step through those together and explain what you're seeing on your screen. But it really is a testament to all the hard work and the folks that are pulled together to do these recovery operations. As you said, the boat was staged earlier this evening, and everything is set up and ready for Crew-7 to splash down 9 minutes and 30 seconds from now. We expect that acquisition of signal, that blackout period, to end in about 4 minutes or less from now. Again, as you mentioned, we might begin to hear the Corps start to call out to the crew to see if they've regained communications with them yet. Sometimes it happens a little earlier than we expect, sometimes a little bit later. All of that is normal. It just is dependent upon when we regain communications with the crew. So again, we're expecting that acquisition of signal in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and it looks like we are getting our very first view of Dragon there on your screen. green is streaking through the sky as it continues to re-enter the atmosphere. Again, those parachutes have not quite deployed just yet, but once they are through the atmosphere successfully, we'll first see the drogue chutes deploy. We're targeting 2:43 a.m. Pacific for that, and just seconds later at 2:44 a.m. we'll see the main chutes deploy, and of course splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific off the coast of Pensacola.
Yeah, this view is a thermal view, tracking cam from NASA's WB-57 plane. I always love seeing this come through because just the brightness gives you a good idea of, and it will start to get dimmer and dimmer as we get closer to the drogue parachute deployment. This looks like it is a live view coming from Megan, which is the recovery vessel positioned a safe distance away from the anticipated splashdown site. I believe this is the tracking cam, not thermal, more, I'm not sure the right way to describe it, but it's a live view camera, but adjusted for the darkness of the night sky. So that's why the pixels on the camera might look a little wonky there.
And even from this view, it's just spectacular. So amazing to see. We are expecting the acquisition of signal to be about 2 minutes from now, and splashdown, again, we're less than 10 minutes away from that, 7 minutes or so away from splashdown of Crew-7 to wrap up their 6-month science and research mission to the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX, ComCheck.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
All right, so that was the voice.
We have you the same. Expect automated chute deployment.
As the voice of Commander Jasmine Mogbelli.
Automated chute deployment.
Great to hear her voice on the other side of the comms blackout. And a great view here, that thermal cam showing us live reentry of the Crew-7 team on board Dragon Endurance.
And the Corps also did let Jasmine Mogbelli and the Crew-7 crew know that they expect a nominal or normal drogue chute deploy, expecting us to maybe begin to get some views of that here in about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes from now. And then following that will be the main chutes that deploy. Continuing to get some really incredible views of Crew-7.
Dragon SpaceX GPS is converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
All right, good news there. That's an indicator that we can expect the drogue parachutes to release about the 350 mile per hour speed, or about 18,000 feet above the ocean. As I mentioned, the streak becomes dimmer just prior to the chute deployment. This view here is coming to us from our recovery vessel Megan, which is the large vessel that will make its way out to the capsule and ultimately pick it up out of the ocean and place it in the nest on board. Now we should see the drogues pop out
brace
here.
For drogue window.
Dragon copy.
The thermal cam will provide us a much better view of the parachute deployment.
So we are standing by for those drogues to deploy. We should see that begin to happen here any second from now.
Tracking to about 15 seconds until drogue deploy. Once again, Dragon is reading its altitude as well as barometric pressure to determine when the appropriate, and there we can see the drogues deploying now, the appropriate time to deploy those drogue parachutes.
And so these drogue parachutes do help to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle ahead of the mains being deployed a short time after.
Expecting mains
Drogue
at
chute
about
descent
30.
rate nominal.
All right, that's great news there, indicating that the rate of deceleration with the drogue chutes is as expected. The main parachutes will deploy next. That will occur around the 6,500 foot mark above the ocean surface. And at that point in time, the capsule will be traveling around 120 miles per hour. And we can see those main parachutes deploying now. Those drogue parachutes will land in the ocean, and hopefully we will be able to recover them, but they kind of sink quickly sometimes. So the recovery teams will go out and try to recover those drogue parachutes for reuse on future cargo missions. We can see here.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
I 1 meters.
Great news there, indicating that the deceleration rate of the...
Copy 1,000.
So at this point in time, Jasmine is now transitioning into calling out Dragon's altitude. Beautiful thermal view there of the capsule and 4 healthy mains. It's hard to tell in this view because, again, it is thermal, but the parachutes are orange and white. If you've seen a daytime launch, you'll know what they look like, and we should be able to see, hopefully...
800 meters.
Dragon is now 800 meters
Copy 800.
above the ocean. Now, once Dragon splashes down, the capsule will automatically cut the ties to the parachutes. This helps in the case where it might be windy. It isn't today. Wind speeds are pretty low at the moment.
600 meters.
But if it were a little windy, it would help to ensure that
Copy 6.
that Dragon doesn't get destabilized by having the main parachutes. And we will also recover those main parachutes from as they float in the ocean as well.
And standing by for that splashdown, now about a minute away from that or less.
400 meters.
400 meters is what Jasmine just called out. So the next call out we'll hear is for 200 meters, and then of course splashdown. So continuing to get great views of 4 healthy mains as well as the Crew Dragon with 4 astronauts on board.
Bracing at 200.
And the crew is bracing for splashdown. We do hear that the fast
SpaceX copies 200 and braced.
The fast boats are en route. Standing by for splashdown.
What a beautiful sight. As you can see on your screen, we have
Dragon, splashdown.
SpaceX copies, see the same.
visual and audio confirmation for splashdown of Dragon Endurance. It has now returned home, and NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli, along with ESA astronaut Andy Mogensen, JAXA astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov are back on Earth after an approximately 18.5-hour return journey from space. The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they are now making their way to that splashdown site.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see Crew-7 back on Earth after 199 days in space. They splashed down at 5:47 a.m. Eastern Time, and the teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away in preparation for splashdown. So,
Dragon SpaceX, on behalf of all of SpaceX, welcome home. We're with you in 4.800.
SpaceX is in our Thanks for the ride up, and more importantly, a safe ride down. And thank you to NASA. To be back on planet Earth.
And we did hear some words from NASA astronaut Jasmine
SpaceX
Mogbelli.
copies, mains cut.
We didn't quite catch them all, but of course the sentiment was her thanks for the folks that have helped supported their mission and ensured that they got back home safely on Earth. You can see that the sea is really quite smooth. It doesn't look like it's too choppy at all. And we also did hear the confirmation that the drogue parachutes were successfully cut as expected. That is something that happens in the recovery process here.
What we're looking at right now is a thermal image. And once we are able, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Once the recovery vessel is closer.
I think it's stable 1.
Copy, stable 1.
So that was just Jasmine reporting on Dragon's position for splashdown. This orientation is known as stable 1, as we've seen in all of our Dragon splashdowns. But once Megan gets closer, recovery vessel Megan gets closer to the capsule, we'll be able to have not thermal, but just regular views, because those vessels that are on its way, the fast boats, as well as Megan, have lights and bright lights at that. And so we'll be able to see better views of Dragon once the recovery vessel gets a little bit closer. But that takes several minutes to complete, as the capsule, as the recovery team has been waiting 3 nautical miles away from the splashdown site. So it'll take a few minutes for Megan to chug along over to recover the Crew-7 team.
And we did see a lot of social media hits of folks in the Midwest as they watched Crew-7 re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. But we actually have someone on the phone who had a bird's eye view on the recovery vessel Megan. We have NASA's Rebecca Turkington, a NASA Public Affairs Officer at the Johnson Space Center, who was on the boat during the re-entry and splashdown. So again, she had a great firsthand view of the crew returning and splashing down. So Rebecca, how can you hear us?
Dragon SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in 1 minute.
That's great to hear, Rebecca, and we are hearing some communications to the crew.
Expect recovery personnel in 1 minute.
That we do expect the recovery personnel to begin to approach.
Permission to come on board via the display camera view only.
So while we work through that.
Hey, Sandra, how do you hear me?
And Dragon wanted to come on board.
Sandra,
And Rebecca, we're going to come back to you in just a minute as we work through these dynamic operations for recovery. Stand by and we'll be back with you in just a minute. And so we did hear those communications to Crew-7, letting them know that the recovery teams would begin to approach here momentarily. So we might be able to get some views on our screens as we see those fast boats begin to approach the Dragon capsule.
Exactly. So there's, a couple of fast boats that are dedicated to retrieving the parachutes out of the water, as well as a fast boat that will be dedicated to approaching the capsule and basically using personal protective equipment for the folks that are on the boat, because at this point in time, Dragon has just come back from space. It's possible that there are some residual hypergolic fumes around the Draco thrusters and around the nose cone. So the team is actually going to approach with a hypergol sniffer.
SpaceX, just for awareness, we are on board with the display camera at this time.
Okay, copy, on board with the display camera.
And that was just SpaceX Core letting the Crew-7 team know that there it is, that view is online once again. This allows us to see over their shoulders and once again see what they're looking at on their screens. At this point in time, it should be pretty stagnant in terms of none of the Draco thrusters are going to be firing anymore. They're already back in the water, so there's no trajectory to look at. And there we can see on the right-hand side of your screen one of those fast boats approaching the Dragon Endurance capsule. And as I was saying, there could be residual hypergolic fumes or left over around the Draco thrusters or around the nose cones. So that team is actually approaching with PPE or personal protective equipment such as respirators and masks to approach closely Dragon Endurance, but they will actually use a hypergol sniffer to detect whether or not there are any of those fumes lingering. This takes a couple minutes to complete, and once they basically check and get green light in terms of no residuals, no fumes lingering, they will give the green light for the rest of the recovery team to approach the capsule and begin the rigging of the capsule for onboarding it onto the recovery vessel. But I think the communications have slowed down for a minute, so I'd love to hear what it was like on the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to Rebecca Turkington, NASA Public Affairs Officer, who was on the boat during Crew-7 re-entry and splashdown. And let's see if we do have a good comms check with her at this point. Rebecca, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How do you read me?
We've got you loud and clear. Thank you so much for your patience there as we work through some of those communications back and forth with the crew. So I would love to know, Rebecca, how was the view from the recovery vessel? What was it like? Tell us everything.
Well, I think a lot of us on board the ship have a new core memory after seeing Dragon splash down this morning. We were about 1.5 nautical miles away from the landing zone, had a great view from the front of the ship. We saw the spacecraft appear across the horizon, a gorgeous reflection on the ocean, heard a really nice sonic boom, and we tracked Dragon all the way down to Splashdown. And it's great to see Crew-7 back home, and wow, just what a way to start the morning.
I love to hear that. I can tell from the excitement in your voice that it was pretty spectacular. So I'm so happy you were able to witness this. So the next question we have for you is about the weather. We've been tracking the weather throughout this journey. Teams, of course, gave the go for landing off of Pensacola here today. So how have the landing conditions been from your perspective?
Well, Sandra, Crew-7 may have missed out on fall and winter back here on Earth while they were on board the International Space Station, but they're going to get a little taste of it this morning. It's in the low 40s out here, but winds are very light, coming in about 2 miles per hour, and we have just about 1 foot of wave height. You can really barely feel it on the ship right now. Wow. So conditions are about as ideal as they can be when it comes to those wind and waves, but it will definitely be a very refreshing first breath for the crew that they take back here on Earth.
Absolutely. That sea really looks glass-like almost. So just a couple more questions for you. Can you describe the journey of the recovery forces to get to this point and what that entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. So our original journey started almost close to a week ago in Florida with so many teams coming in to make preparations for the crew's return. After Pensacola was selected as our splashdown site, the recovery team and the vessels were relocated here. And for splashdown this morning, it was an early start. We took a series of helicopters out to the recovery vessel starting at about 4.5 hours before splashdown. The medical team and recovery director were on that first flight, and then the rest of us followed after that.
Sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is now in progress.
That's great to hear, Rebecca, and we are hearing that the hypergol...
Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
Dragon is happy as well, standing by for PMC.
Again, we are hearing that the hypergol checks were nominal. They did not detect any of that. So our very last question for you, Rebecca, before we continue to talk through the recovery process is what's next to retrieve the crew?
Yes, I'm sure you'll walk everyone through how Dragon's going to be hoisted onto the recovery vessel. After the crew has egressed the vehicle on the ship, they will head over to the med bay where they'll get checked out by our medical team, and they'll also start to take off those white dynamic spacesuits. And after their medical checks, they will board a helicopter and head to the airport, where a plane is waiting to take them back to Houston to begin their post-flight period. I also wanted to mention that the crew is not the only ones on board Dragon. We also have really important cargo and science from experiments that are going to deliver benefits for people back here on Earth. So the cargo team will also start working this morning through the rest of the day to inventory and process those high-priority cargo items. Some teams are going to come in here to Florida to pick those up, and then others we are going to ship out to various national centers. So it's just been such a beautiful splashdown this morning, and so happy and proud to be here. And with that, I'll turn things back over to you at Hawthorne.
Well, there you had it, a firsthand experience of what it was like to witness Crew-7 splashdown off of Pensacola. Thank you so much for your time, Rebecca. That was Rebecca Turkington, NASA Public Affairs Officer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
All right, so as you can see there on your screen, that's a live view on the left-hand side inside Dragon Endurance. On the right-hand side is thermal cam tracking the recovery operations.
Dragon SpaceX ComCheck on Dragon to ground public.
We've got you loud and clear.
All right, have you the same. I'll be back on board with updates as we get closer to capsule lift.
Okay, we copy. Thanks.
So while the Crew-7 crew members were doing their private conference with the flight surgeon post-splashdown, just an initial check to make sure that everybody's feeling okay, doing good. We took those comms out, and so that was just a check to make sure that we got the comms back on the public feed. This is actually here our first live view of a normal camera of recovery operations.
SpaceX, be advised, we're going to be transitioning the forward link. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Okay, Dragon copies. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
So at this point in time, the recovery team is kind of split in half. Half of them are located on the recovery vessel Megan, which is the location from which we were receiving that camera view that we just had previously. This one is obviously coming from inside the Dragon capsule. But the other half of the recovery teams are in those fast boats. They've been tasked with retrieving the parachutes from the water, as well as performing the safety checks post-splashdown. Once again, those were basically performing checks to make sure there weren't any hypergolic or pyrotechnic residuals, which, obviously pyrotechnic could be dangerous for explosive reasons, but hypergolics are incredibly poisonous if you breathe them. So we weren't able to see it super clearly on the screen. However, the crew out there had personal protective equipment to ensure that they were breathing, clean air while they were performing those checks. Those sweeps we heard were nominal, so that was the green light for the other portion of the fast boat crew to approach. And there is actually a SpaceX recovery team member crawling around the capsule at this moment in time. Hopefully we can get that view back momentarily. It looked like there might have been something in the way of the camera previously, but when we have that view back, we'll bring it to you. But there's an individual responsible for basically securing the harnesses around the capsule itself. Those will be used to lift the capsule out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. But of course, those straps have to be put in place by hand. So there's somebody, actually you can, I think that was actually Jasmine's hand that we saw in the shadow. I thought maybe we might be able to see the the shadow of the individual crawling around the capsule through the window. But yeah, there's somebody actually crawling around to place those harnesses in the correct position and secure them. There's a number of harnesses that are required as the vehicle itself is quite heavy, and once those are all in place, we will lift the vehicle up into the recovery vessel using hydraulic lifts, and that will basically put the capsule onto the vessel in a nest, which is movable. We basically plop the capsule into the nest on the aft end of the vessel, and then we translate, or we pull that nest forward so that the side hatch is at the unloading platform, which of course is where we will see the crew egress from the capsule. Now we can actually see that side hatch where they're about to egress from there at the bottom center of your screen. It's the item there that is in a black outline. Pardon me. That side hatch is the same hatch that they used to ingress. How many days did you say? 199 days?
Yes, they were in space for 199 days. Of those, 197 were on board space station, of course, to include the transit to and from space station.
Gotcha. So all that time, that side hatch has remained closed as the crew was utilizing the forward hatch to ingress and egress the space station, of course, because that's where the docking adapter is located. So that's the point in which Dragon has to dock with the space station. So yeah, that side hatch that we can kind of see there, it will open for the first time in hundreds of days, and it will be Crew-7's first breath of fresh air since they lifted off. That side hatch, of course, goes through multiple checks while it's still on the ground, and it obviously is not intended for use while it is while the vehicle is on station.
Yeah, absolutely right. And if you're just joining us, it's been a busy but very exciting early morning for us here in Hawthorne. Crew-7 splashed down off of the coast of Pensacola, Florida at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time. The crew is still in the capsule awaiting to be fully recovered while the team works through that. They'll eventually, as you were discussing, Kate, be moved onto the boat and be able to get out of the hatch that is directly in front of them. But just some quick facts about the Crew-7 mission. As we said, they spent 199 days in space total. Of those, 197 were spent on the International Space Station. They completed 3,184 orbits of the Earth and traveled more than 84,434,000 statute miles around the Earth, which is just a massive number when you think about it. Andy Mogensen has logged 199 days in space over his increments. Of course, he was a part of Expedition 69 and 70, and will have totaled 209 days in space, including time from his previous spaceflight. This is NASA astronaut and commander of Crew-7, Jasmine Mogbelli's first space flight, so of course she's logged 199 days in space. Satoshi Furukawa of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency has the most time in space of this crew. He has logged a total of 366 days in space over 2 flights. And Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos has spent 199 days in space as well. This was his very first space flight. Just a couple more fun facts for you all. The crew saw the arrival of 7 visiting vehicles, which included 2 SpaceX cargo Dragons. That was SpaceX 28 and SpaceX 29.
Dragon SpaceX, com check.
Dragon has you loud and clear. How many?
Loud and clear. Forward link transition is complete.
Copy.
And so we did hear that call out a few minutes ago that there would be about a 5-minute comms outage while they work to get communications configured. All of that is now configured properly, so we might hear some more communications back and forth with the crew ahead of their recovery and placement on the recovery vessel. But just to continue those fun facts for you all, so the crew did see 7 visiting vehicles arrive. They saw 7 visiting vehicles depart, and there was 1 spacewalk that took place during the Crew-7 mission, and that included NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli for a 6-hour and 42-minute spacewalk, the very first in her career.
Wow, what an incredible stay on station.
And the hundreds of science experiments that they also contributed to as well, so they were certainly busy during this increment.
I bet they're probably looking forward to a nap or two once they are back on firm ground and have gone through their end of mission proceedings.
Yep, absolutely. And once they are successfully on the recovery boat, they will take that helicopter back to Florida since they splashed down off the coast of Pensacola, and then they'll ride in a plane back to Houston and complete some additional medical checks, some rehabilitation, and then for both Satoshi and Constantine, they'll fly back, and Andy as well, they'll fly back to their respective countries. This was the very first mission, actually, where every single seat is occupied by a member from a different space agency. So that's exciting to see as well.
Very cool. Now, on the note of recovery after performing a long duration space flight, we will be assisting the crew members outside as they egress through the side hatch. This is standard procedure for NASA crew missions, because they have been up there for an extensive amount of time. And of course, the body changes while you're in microgravity.
Dragon SpaceX rigging is complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
All right, so that's great news there.
Dragon Cap is about 5 minutes to lift.
So you can see the recovery platform there in the foreground of this particular view. That is exactly where the crew will ultimately be assisted to. And then we can see the Dragon capsule in the background there, bobbing very gently in the silky black waters there. I have to say, I've covered, this is probably my 6th, maybe 7th Splashdown webcast, and this is, to my memory, the smoothest sea I've ever seen. Some of the views that we had earlier, the water just looked like glass. The waves are so calm. So it's great to see. Obviously, those make for easier, quicker recovery conditions. We did hear about a minute ago that we're 5 minutes out, so now 4 minutes out from lifting the capsule. There is a hydraulic lift there at the back end of the capsule. Oh, there's a great view of it there with our recovery team members positioning the hydraulic lift into place. The team member that was on the capsule, I think they may have jumped off already. Yeah, it looks like the fast boat is departing. So that's always one of my favorite, but also like terrifying moments to watch, is that SpaceX team member with, oh, actually, no, they're still there. So the area where they're standing is actually the bay where the main parachutes are packed. So all 4 parachutes are packed so tightly, they fit back there into that bin you could think of. So that SpaceX recovery team member is doing the final preparations for the harnesses there on Dragon Endurance, which will be basically hooked onto by the rigging. We can see that hydraulic lift now being lowered. Once everything is attached, we will see that individual that is on the capsule jump off into the water. And of course, we don't want them to be on the capsule while it is being translated up and onto the vessel for obvious safety reasons.
And Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back into port. So we'll stand by for that lifting to happen just a couple minutes from now once they get everything successfully secured. And so I did just want to jump into, we were talking a bit about the crew and how they would be helped out of the capsule, and this is a very standard procedure for NASA.
Dragon SpaceX, brace for capsule lift.
Dragon Cappy, braces for lift.
And so we will see that individual jump off the capsule here in just a second, and then the capsule will be lifted onto the recovery vessel.
I like to think of this as the SpaceX swan dive. And there we can see jumped in and is now making his way over to the fast boat where his SpaceX recovery team members will pull him on board just like that. And now don't blink because the lifting of the capsule takes just a matter of seconds. It's quite smooth and happens rather quickly. Like you were saying, we're going to lift that up out of the water and place it in the nest. That nest will then get translated to the recovery deck, and there we can see Dragon Endurance now being lifted out of the water using those hydraulic lifts. Swinging a little bit, but it will be centered using the tethers and then placed into that nest once centered. all in all, this seems like a pretty quick recovery. Let's see, if we had splashdown at
247.
57. I don't want to call this for sure, but this definitely feels like one of the fastest recoveries I've ever been a part of.
SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are now completing final checks and stand by for translation to egress platform.
I can copy.
So at 6:14 a.m. Eastern, 3:14 a.m. Pacific, Dragon Endurance has been lifted up and out of the Gulf of Mexico and is now secure on our recovery vessel.
And so next up, we will see Dragon appear to slide forward as it gets a little further in on the recovery vessel. And then the team will work to open up that hatch and get the crew out. Again, we do expect the crew to be assisted in getting removed from the capsule because they have been aboard the International Space Station for the past 6 months. Even though they work out for a couple hours a day to maintain bone and muscle health, the adjustment back to the 1G environment on Earth can be something that takes a little getting used to. So as a safety precaution, we always do just help any of our crew members returning from space out of the vessel. So again, we're about 30 minutes or so since we splashed down, or since Crew-7 rather splashed down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. They're already on the recovery vessel, and we are just awaiting the next steps in the process in order to get the crew out safe and sound. And the hatch that they'll actually be exiting or egressing from is in the center of your screen there. It's kind of a square-shaped it's a square-shaped hatch there, and we'll see the teams install a bit of hardware around the edge of the hatch once they get it open to help protect it, and then we'll see the crew come out. But we also will see the footrest get removed to give a little more space for the crew as they work through those recovery operations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we want to ensure that astronaut safety is, priority number one, and removing those footrests helps with that because, like you said, we will be assisting the crew to egress out of the capsule, and removing the footrest just gives the recovery teams a bit more room inside the capsule to move around along with the crew.
Absolutely, and you can see a more internal view of the hatch that we were just referring to there. Towards the lower portion of your screen, you can see the black outline around it. That is, of course, the hatch that the crew will exit out of. That's been closed since they entered in Dragon all the way back in August for their launch.
For those of you that have just recently tuned in, we had an on-time splashdown of Crew-7 at 5:47 a.m. Eastern, 2:47 a.m. Pacific, and just 3 minutes ago, the Dragon Endurance capsule, was lifted up and out of the water and into the nest of the recovery vessel. The recovery vessel utilized for Gulf operations is Megan, and one not being used today is for the Atlantic operations. And what we see here are, this is a cool view because we can see it better now. I want to point it out before we lose it, is that bay where the main parachutes are stored. That is the rounded square just below the side hatch, right underneath where that individual is stepping into. So if you can imagine, that gives you a good perspective of just how tightly those main parachutes have to be packed in there in order to stow them and obviously release them. And the drogue parachutes, for those of you that might be wondering, we don't really have quite as good of a view, but they come from the bay just above the side hatch.
And so the next major milestone that we will look ahead to see is when Dragon will slide a little further back in the recovery boat, like we mentioned earlier, and then we'll have the hatch opening process begin to get underway. So again, everything continuing to go really smoothly this morning following a splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific of Crew-7, completing their 199-day mission in space, 197 days aboard the International Space Station. The crew actually undocked from the International Space Station yesterday morning at 8:20 a.m. Pacific. So like we mentioned, a little less than 24 hours for their journey back to Earth. But everything going smoothly. They splashed down successfully off the coast of Pensacola, and now the recovery team is just working through those procedures in order to get the hatch open and get the crew out here shortly.
At this point in time, as you can see, the Dragon vehicle is still positioned at the aft end of the recovery vessel. Once everything is in place, we will translate the nest where the capsule is sitting forward toward the forward end of the vessel, and that is where the recovery deck is located, where additional SpaceX team members and NASA team members are awaiting. The Crew-7 team, SpaceX team members will go through the side hatch opening procedure, which involves an additional sweep for hypergolics and like you mentioned earlier, removing the side hatch and placing a bit of protective covering around the edge of the side hatch. This helps to protect not only the capsule, but also the team members that are going in the capsule to help the Crew-7 crew members egress through the side hatch.
So it does look like they are starting to wrap up this portion of Dragon being in the nest. So we should expect that translation to occur here in just a couple minutes from now. They'll remove some of those attachments from the vehicle before that translation occurs. And so from this view, we do have a pretty good view of both the nose cone being closed, which closed prior to splashdown, but that is the hatch that the crew used when they docked to the International Space Station, as well as entered the International Space Station. It's not the one that they're going to exit out of this morning, though. They're going to exit out of that side hatch there. You can see it in the middle of the Dragon capsule.
We also have a good view of Dragon's thermal protection system, also known as TPS. That is all of the white paneling around the side. Of course, after re-entry, it is a little less white than before. If you recall, on launch day, it was a pristine white, and that is not the case anymore, as the thermal protection system has done its job, and quite beautifully. I love how no capsule return is identical. They're kind of like a fingerprint. They all look a little different.
And following the crew getting out of the Dragon, they will, as we mentioned, be taken by helicopter back to shore, and then eventually back by plane to Houston, Texas. And the Dragon vehicle will be refurbished, taken back to the processing facility in order to be reused again. And so it does look like we are seeing that translation on your screen. And another view here, we can continue to see that translation as it occurs. It'll get put right in between those two gate-looking areas, and then the crew can begin to work hatch opening operations.
We can also see a SpaceX team member hosing the vehicle down. This helps to wash some of the salt water off. Obviously, we want to ensure that corrosion is controlled. Anything that comes into contact with salt water, salt in general, is quite corrosive, and so we're going to start basically rinsing the capsule off to try and remove as much of that salt water as possible.
And so some of the next steps that we'll see will be personnel on the recovery vessel that are specialized in opening up the hatch begin that process.
Yeah, we can actually see they've donned their PPE once again, so they're going to perform some additional safety checks to ensure that there are no hypergolic residuals or fumes there around the side hatch. Once again, this is the hypergolic fumes are toxic if you breathe them in, so we want to ensure that none of those are remaining.
And this view back inside Dragon, as you can see, NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli, commander, and ESA, European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen. It's Jasmine's first flight, and it is Andy's second space flight. And so we also do have medical doctors on board that help to take care of the crew after the hatch opening and will conduct a series of initial checks before they are flown off by that helicopter back to shore. So as the team continues to work through those hatch opening operations, it is important to note that Jasmine Mogbelli, Andy Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov will be getting some assistance from their recovery teams while they exit the capsule. So this is the same process for any returning long-duration space flight for Dragon. You also see it when we have the Soyuz that lands with crew on board. They're helped out of the capsule and then transported via chair over to the medical recovery tent. So this is standard operating procedure for long-duration space flights. So it hasn't even been an hour since Crew-7 splashed down at 2:47 a.m. Pacific, and they are already on the recovery vessel. The team has secured them in the Dragon's nest and completed that translation maneuver to get them a little bit closer into the prime position for hatch opening. And they are beginning to step through some of those procedures to get that hatch open here shortly. Getting another view here of the hatch. You can see it pretty clearly in your screen.
We can see that they've removed the access panel on the side hatch. Excuse me. That side hatch access panel basically protects the location where we perform the side hatch leak check. So we will...
Dragon SpaceX, stand by for side hatch opening and egress. We'll be passing you off to the recovery team, and see you back in Hawthorne soon.
Dragon captains, they're here.
So yeah, that side hatch access panel is where we are able to untorque as you can see in action now.
And the side hatch is open for the first time in 199 days. Looks like we're getting some waves from Crew-7. First face they've seen back on Earth since August.
Once again, this is their first breath of fresh air in several months, and once again, the first time that the side hatch has been open. The last time it was open was the day they went to space. So it looks like here just the SpaceX team member doing initial check-in with the crew, making sure that everybody is feeling okay and feels ready to egress from the capsule. Probably letting them know that there is, no return trip at this moment, no rocket in place.
I'll have to wait to be reassigned for the next one, I guess. So again, Crew-7 launched back in August 26th of 2023. So in all, they spent 199 days in space. And so we will begin to see some of that safety equipment installed around the hatch just for protection purposes and for reuse capabilities. And then we'll even begin to see some of those footrests begin to be removed to just give the crew a little more space to get out.
But first, a photo opportunity.
Yep, absolutely.
We probably couldn't see it from this view, but I have a feeling that there was some thumbs up for the photo. So at this point in time, we should see some of those footrests begin to be removed. Not entirely sure what the order will be here in terms of who will egress first. It always varies from crew to crew, but it looks like we may have some footrests coming off now. Once again, this just allows the folks that are assisting the crew in their egress a little bit more room to work. Fun fact, the footrests are custom sized to each astronaut in terms of like small, medium, or large. So in order to ensure maximum safety and comfort, we customize the footrest as well as the armrest, as well as the bucket itself, the seat bucket rather, that they sit in. As every astronaut is different, and so to ensure that everybody is able to remain comfortable and safe, those items are customized for their body proportions as well as the spacesuits themselves. Speaking of spacesuits, we can see that those visors are in the open and up position. So once the crew was safely splashed down, they were given the okay to lift the visors. No need to keep those down and in the locked position once we were outside of those dynamic events. For those of you that have just recently joined us, we had a beautiful nighttime splashdown at 5:47 a.m. Eastern or 2:47 a.m. Pacific. The Dragon Endurance vehicle is now on board our recovery vessel Megan in the Gulf, just off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, and we're now awaiting the egress or the exit of our 4 Crew-7 members. And this will be assisted out onto the recovery deck.
And the recovery vessel is actually named after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur. She flew on board Crew-2. That was my first space launch I ever got to see in person, so really special to get to see her launch. She also flew on board STS-125. So great to see Crew-7 back on board Megan's namesake. We are expecting egress here in just a couple minutes. They are working to install that safety equipment around the hatch as well as remove the footrests. And so we typically will either see the commander or the pilot egress or get out of their seats first, and that's just due to the proximity of their location to the hatch. Usually it's a little easier to get one of those two out ahead of the mission specialists on either side.
Now you mentioned the namesake for Megan. Of course, our The Atlantic Recovery Vessel is named after Shannon Walker, who flew on the NASA Crew-1 mission. So we named these recovery vessels after our first 2 female astronauts to fly in our Dragon capsules. So I love the tribute there that we have paid to these incredible women that have taken part in spaceflight here at SpaceX.
So as they continue to step through those procedures, again, just a reminder, we do expect the crew to be assisted out of the vehicle, as well as be assisted in standing up and getting rolled away in order for those initial medical checks. This is standard for all long-duration space flights. And they'll jump right into their post-flight reconditioning period that begins on splashdown day, and it lasts for about 45 days to help return crew members to their pre-flight condition. Like we've mentioned, they do exercise while on board the International Space Station for a couple hours a day, and that does help maintain some bone and muscle mass and prevent that loss. But because of the microgravity environment of the International Space Station, there is still a recovery period that takes place. And again, that's about a 45-day period to just get them back to pre-flight condition.
Now, immediately after they egress from the capsule, they will be transported back into, excuse me, one of the medical bays that are on board the recovery vessel, where they will be seen by the flight surgeon for a preliminary medical checkup immediately after egressing.
It looks like we are going to have our very first views of egress here.
I think that may have been Andy.
This is Andy's second spaceflight. He's from the European Space Agency. And Andy Mogensen now out of Crew-7 capsule. And you see he is getting assisted there. That is completely normal, and as expected, this will take place for all 4 crew members.
Yeah, this is standard procedure when we egress the NASA astronauts from Dragon. We assist them into, it's not quite a wheelchair, it's not quite a, I can't think of the word for it. Not a gurney, but we roll them back into the medical bay, and this just helps ensure their safety. Because sometimes, even though we had amazing recovery conditions tonight, it's not always the case. Sometimes we can get wave height of a couple feet, which could make for an unstable vessel. So, regardless of the sea conditions, we always assist the crew in getting out of the capsule and making their way back to the medical bay.
We did see some thumbs up and some cheers for Andy Mogensen as he egressed the capsule. Next up is going to be the commander of Crew-7. That's NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli. This is her first spaceflight.
What an experience it must be, this first time of feeling gravity for really kind of the first time, because if you're born into it and you don't really know what it's like to not feel it, I could imagine it would be quite an experience to feel it and really feel it for, at this magnitude for the first time.
And some waves there from NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli. So next up out of the capsule will be the 2 mission specialists, Konstantin Borisov from Roscosmos, as well as Satoshi Furukawa from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. So if you're just joining us, Crew-7 splashdown off the coast of Florida at 2:47 a.m. Pacific. We've had 2 crew members already egress or exit the capsule. That was European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen, as well as NASA astronaut Jasmine Mogbelli. And there's 2 more astronauts on board, and we're working through those egress procedures, everything going really smoothly. Following this, the crew will fly back to shore via helicopter, and then they will fly by plane back to Houston, and from there they will go to their respective countries. Again, as we mentioned, this is the very first space flight where every single seat was occupied by a member of a different space agency. We are seeing on our screen there another one of the footrests as it is removed, just to give the crew, the recovery crew rather, a little more space in order to help get the crew out.
As we mentioned, 2 of the 4 have already egressed. Excuse me, we already have Commander Jasmine Mogbelli and pilot Andreas Mogensen. They've already exited. We now have Konstantin Borisov and Satoshi Furukawa still on board. Excuse me, it's early or late.
Furukawa.
Thank you, Furukawa. Still on board the Dragon capsule. And we should see one of them egress here just momentarily.
And it looks like they're beginning to egress now. I believe this is Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos, his first space flight. And Konstantin Borisov has successfully egressed. Some handshakes there, it looks like.
Thumbs up and happy waves.
Yep. So the remaining Crew-7 crew member inside Dragon is JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Satoshi Furukawa. Again, this is his second space flight. And so Satoshi Furukawa actually has the most time spent in space of Crew-7. He's logged a total of 366 days in space over 2 flights. So just a little over a year in space in all.
That's incredible. And it looks like he is now egressing. Once again, this is standard procedure for assisting all the crew members into the medical bays.
And Satoshi Furukawa, the last member of Crew-7, now out of the vehicle.
So I just did a bit of math. Now that we have officially egressed all 4 crew members, we had an on-time splashdown at 2:47 a.m. Pacific. We lifted we lifted the capsule onto the recovery vessel at 3:14 a.m. So that was a total of 27 minutes for recovery operations. And then it was from 3:14 a.m. to 3:42 a.m. when we completed egress, another 28 minutes. So it basically took just as long to lift them out of the water as it did to bring them out of the capsule. So all in all, really efficient recovery operations. So congrats to the SpaceX recovery team on such efficient operations there.
Absolutely. Less than an hour from splashdown to egress. So great to see that. And now that Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. So this all kicked off on in August of 2023 from historic launch pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine made a 29-hour flight on board Dragon to the International Space Station. And since arriving at the space station, they spent nearly 6 months as members of Expedition 69 and 70, executing science experiments, a spacewalk, and repairs while aboard the orbiting laboratory.
Their journey home began about 19 hours ago on March 11th when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 8:20 a.m. Pacific time. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning. We jettisoned Dragon's trunk and performed our final on-orbit maneuver, the approximately 14-minute-long deorbit burn at 1:56 a.m. Pacific time or 4:56 a.m. Eastern time, and that ultimately is what put Dragon on its path home. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 healthy mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of Pensacola, Florida at 2:47 a.m. Pacific time or 5:47 a.m. Eastern time. Now, as you saw following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in quickly and prepare Dragon Endurance for its lift into the recovery vessel, or onto the recovery vessel, and in just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities, safe and sound.
Next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore where they'll transfer to aircraft that will take them home. Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston, and then they'll be reunited with families to bring an end to this mission. It's been an honor and a privilege to share this journey with all of you as we continue in this new era in human spaceflight.
Return today marks the end of the direct handover that we just executed after successfully launching the Crew-7 mission to the space station just a little over a week ago. It's been an incredible honor and joy to share this mission with the public. All of the teams from SpaceX and NASA continue to work hard to keep America leading the world in human spaceflight. Continue to follow SpaceX and NASA online and on social media for updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station.
And we will, of course, continue to share the progress of Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine on social media as they travel back home. We also have a post-splashdown media telecon coming up at approximately 4 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Eastern, where leadership from NASA, JAXA, ESA, and SpaceX will share a final update as we conclude this successful mission. So we'll say thanks one more time for tuning in and cheering on Jasmine, Andy, Satoshi, and Constantine as they made their return back to Earth. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, welcome home, Crew-7, and on behalf of the many incredible females who have supported Crew-7 and contributed to the success of this mission across NASA and SpaceX, ESA and JAXA and Roscosmos, happy Women's History Month. So long.